Good morning,
All right.
everyone. We are here with Joel Grabber. He is an expert in modern outbound marketing. Super exciting session for the Marketing Innovation Summit. It's our third session for the day. We had amazing speakers go over, video conversions, and then the with the new release of Google, that's going to change the game on how we prepare and how we do our content marketing. And now we're going to go into, how to prepare for outbound, how to improve your outbound, going from technology, writing your content, personalization. Joel is an expert on the topic. And Joel, we're very happy to have you with us today.
Yeah, excited to be here. Excited to have the conversation with you.
Now, for the audience that may not know you, can you give us a little background on how did you get started? How did you learn so much about, modern outbound? Establish your company, have tons of awesome clients. Give us a little background. How did you get here? And give us that way the
Oh,
audience knows what you're talking about.
ooh, how far back do we want to go? That's the question. So I'll say hi everybody, nice to meet whoever's on the call. I think the story goes back to me always being in sales. I started in the finance kind of Wall Street space, big asset managers, big banks. We had to do outbound. We had to do some form of business development. Uh, we had the shackles on as far as what we could say in an email, what can you do on LinkedIn, what can you say on a cold call. So creatively, it was a little bit stifling, but I was able to really cut my teeth on like the core of like what is actually going to get somebody's attention. Once I moved over to a fintech startup, I was able to get creative, use different outreach tools, build out a really good tech stack, and really helped me like amplify outbound in general. The other big piece, and we'll probably get into SDRs, the state of sales development reps, and how effective they can or can't be. But I got tired of relying on them to get me meetings. So I was a closer, I was a director of partnerships, I was trying to get deals done. And technically, they were supposed to get me meetings, but they weren't. So I had to engineer my own ways to make it happen, which really led to me becoming from going from like good at outbound to like great. And it's kind of multifaceted with copywriting and how to use technology. How do I get in the primary inbox? How do I do all these things every day consistently? I got pretty good at that, and then said, hey, there's a lot of companies out there that need help, that may not want to go all in with a bunch of full-time SDRs, but they want experts. So started Modern Outbound about 4.5 years ago, and never looked back.
Thanks for sharing that story. That's a great example, and it gives us great credibility for what you're going to be speaking to us today. I moved this topic of technology to the forefront of our discussion because it seems like when people speak about sales, they're like, what tech stack are you using? So let's dive right in. Joel, you've seen many different prospecting technologies evolve over the years. What impact have they have? What technologies do you suggest people implement to to really optimize their outbound sales
Yeah.
efforts?
So there's no shortage of sales enablement tools. I think people are kind of paralyzed by how many options there really are. There's ways to automate your email sending. There's ways to automate your LinkedIn connection requests and sending. There's ways to warm up mailboxes. There's ways to clean data. There's thousands and thousands of tools on the market, and you know, anybody can buy a tool. You can buy Zoom Info and spend 15, 20, 30 grand a year. But if you don't have somebody that is operating and really understands how to use it, you're kind of sunk on the cost. So we can talk about specific tools, but whether you look at outreach tools, we use Apollo, which is our email outreach software, which is a fantastic platform. It's also a data platform. But all these platforms can be kind of finicky. So like having somebody on your side, whether it's an account exec or the head of sales or you bring in an agency like ours to be able to really like come in and use it the right way. That's where the rubber meets the road, I think. With outbound, it's less so about okay, I'm going to buy 8 or 9 or 10 of these platforms. I'm going to try to sync them up. Um, that's nice, and that's maybe like 30% of the battle. So we use tools like Apollo. I would recommend looking at that. I don't sell software. I don't get any kickbacks. We use a tool called Expandy for our LinkedIn automation. It's a cloud-based tool. You want to be really safe on LinkedIn when you do automation. Tools like Million Verifier to clean the data is critical. So like if you're going through the trouble of doing outbound, but you don't double verify data, your bounce rates go up, which means your deliverability suffers. And I see that happen very often, even with big marketing teams, big sales teams that have lots of budget, but they're still doing doing the silly mistakes of not cleaning data, not segmenting their list, which we'll get into. But again, not to ramble on that. It's just buy the tools, vet them. I'm happy to give some. I don't know if you do follow up, Steven, with everybody, but I can give you some tools we use. But make sure you have somebody dedicated to the mission.
Yeah, I love it. So you use Apollo for sending out emails, collecting data, and then you, even with Apollo cleaning, you clean it, double clean it, I imagine.
We double verify it, yeah. So we run lists for emails on Apollo. We use tools like Hunter.io if we can't find things in Apollo, although Apollo is pretty good. We use LinkedIn Sales Navigator for data as well, but everything runs through Million Verifier for us to double clean. You've got other tools on the market like Never Bounce, which is pretty good. They're all kind of like on par with each other. Um, Other data platforms we use would be like Ocean.io, which are give you lookalikes. So for anybody listening on the call, I'm sure you have a treasure trove of data in your CRM, like who are my top 5 clients. Um, Using an Ocean would give you very specific lookalikes next to those accounts, and you can leverage the social proof that you have with that current client with others that are kind of in the tribe, so to speak. So uh, data's data's very commoditized now. You know, you can find data fairly easily, but you just want to find the good platforms that work together and all do one thing really well.
What about for, I don't know if you do calling or text messaging, what platforms are you using for that?
So for calling, we don't really do a ton of cold calling. We do warm calling. Once we activate leads and we get prospects that are interested and they're expressing some form of interest in the next step, um, we would bring in warm callers. I have SDRs that would get meetings set. But there's all kinds of like auto power dialers. I'm less of an expert in that space, but there are a couple tools that we've used. We don't do SMS or texting. That's something that you'd probably want to do once you talk to a prospect. You know, it's technically illegal to do SMS or texting to like cold prospects, and I don't find it as effective. It's pretty invasive too. So we stick with what we're good at, which is cold email and building a good machine and LinkedIn outreach and warm calling once prospects get into the ecosystem.
And as we're talking about tools, we've had several people talk about tools, about automating LinkedIn outreach. From your perspective, automating LinkedIn outreach, safe, cautious, should we use those tools? What would you recommend?
I think if you have somebody who knows how to use it, definitely, and you have a good, safe, cloud-based tool, that's important. But if you're going to have, I mean, anything that replaces manual activity, in my mind, is smart. If you have a good strategy and a good campaign behind it, um, we make sure that there are just a few connections that go out each hour. We spread it out over long sending windows. We're not spammy. We make sure that the people we reach out to are actual decision makers. They're in our, whatever the theme of the campaign is, like they're true to that. Um, but yeah, there's so much you can do on these automation tools. You just don't want to overdo it. You know, some people on LinkedIn like to get cute with like building new avatars, new profiles, fake people. I would never recommend, excuse me, I wouldn't recommend any of that. LinkedIn will flag that uh, pretty quickly. I think you want to be very genuine with your outreach. Um, but if you can bridge the gap between like manual activity and automation, like you should try to do that as much as you can.
Now, let's talk about AI. How do you see machine AI, machine learning integrating into prospecting technologies, and what
Yeah,
potential benefits do they offer?
it's a good question. I Everybody's gonna have different opinions on this. I think GPT emails are crap, if I can be honest. I even think they're so bad that receiving servers can actually like sniff it out, and they know when something sounds like it's been written by GPT, especially if it's a cold email. Um, there's a lot of prompt engineering that you can do with a cold email, making sure you get it exactly right. But my philosophy on it is like, if you're going to spend all that time prompt engineering something, just write the email. Like write it. Make sure that it's super targeted to the right person. It's in your words. It sounds more human. You'll get way more engagement. Now, we've built an AI model that works at the middle of the funnel. So to what I was saying earlier, when someone expresses interest and they say, yeah, I want to meet tomorrow, or you know what, I don't think I'm ready to meet. Let's talk in 6 months, or send me some info. We've set up an AI model that can determine the prospect's sentiment and move them into a nurture funnel.
Yeah.
So there are some pretty cool ways to use AI. Um, but as far as using it as like a crutch to write cold emails or LinkedIn, or scripts, I wouldn't recommend it right now. I think one day it'll be sharper than us potentially, but I don't think we're quite there yet.
Um, Very cool. Thanks for the insight. We're going to move on to the next section, or else we're not going to be able to cover all of it. But I mean, we could spend all day on technology
Yeah.
talking about art and science of copywriting for prospects. What are the key principles to guide you in crafting messages that truly resonate, right? We talked about
Yeah.
not using AI, but you got to craft your own. What are the principles that guide you to crafting it?
So there's two types of emails, and I think a lot of a lot of marketing sales teams that I work with conflate the two. There are marketing emails, and then there are outbound emails. And unfortunately, what you see in inboxes are outbound emails that look like marketing emails, which is why a lot of them get ignored. So an outbound, like a marketing email, and the way that I would define marketing is it's got links, it's more designed for click through, it's designed so that you go somewhere or fill a form out. It's usually very product centric, it's usually very formal. Uh, there's all kinds of deliverability implications with something like that, but there's engagement implications. Like people, when they see that, we have that like spam filter in our own head. There's the spam filter of the server, and there's your spam filter that lives in your head. You say, okay, this is a marketing email. It's not really direct response copy, so I'm not going to respond to it. Maybe if I'm really interested, I'll click on it. That is unfortunately what a lot of people write outbound. They use that methodology with outbound emails, and they shouldn't. Like outbound, the philosophy of the way we write and the way we've been writing for 4.5+ years is being very conversational, very short form, 25 to 60 words, soft call to action, not asking for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. People are sick of that. Trying to find a way in your copy to be a pattern interrupt, like where you don't sound like the 80, 90 other emails that this decision maker sees in their inbox, but being very short form and conversational is a great pattern interrupt in and of itself. Being soft on the call to action, like interest based. So instead of asking for time, which is what everyone's doing, you're trying to get their interest. Are you saying like worth exploring, want to learn more? Would this be worthy of a quick email exchange? Can I share how we accomplished X for company Y? Whatever it is, you're kind of separating yourself as less of like a salesperson, more as an advisor, as someone that is a peer um, that's reaching out in an authentic way. And I think it needs to come off that way, which is why GPT and AI is kind of muddying the waters there. But you'd be amazed at what you can do with a 30, 40 word email that's super directed at them. You're not really talking about your own product, how you're the fastest growing company in this category, how you can 6x growth. I think people are really sick of that. And they see it all day, every day. And maybe it feels like you're checking off boxes when you write an email that way. Like, okay, this is like how it's supposed to look. But uh, in reality, it gets ignored. The industry reply rates right now have never been this low. They're less than 1%. Industry average open rates are less than 20%. And I think it's gotten worse. And I think it's going to continue to get worse if we write like that.
Can you give all of us an example of a email that you're like, oh, this was a short one, really works great for me. What does that look like?
Yeah, let me pull up. I can pull up a few examples. If you give me a quick second.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you could put some like holding music on. Just kidding. Okay, so this is a client that I actually just talked to. before we spoke. So I think this would be a good one to kind of read out. So they're a data SaaS platform. Like they have really good zip code level data that retailers use when they decide what kinds of marketing campaigns to run. So um, like
It's not Datum, is it?
no, it's not.
Oh, okay. They're
Uh,
going to be on next week.
Okay, yeah, no, it's not them.
Okay.
So in this case, we reached out to data scientists. It was actually,
Okay.
I'm sorry, it was data research roles at footwear companies. So this company has really good insights on Foot Locker, and we're kind of giving that as an example of great data that we have for Foot Locker. We're reaching out to newly appointed these are these are roles that have data research in their title. So head of research, director of data and analytics. So I'm pulling up one of many different variations that we're sending, but it's like, hey, first name, uh, just saw you got started in the director of research role at company X. Hope it's been a smooth transition. Quick story, we helped quick story is we helped a Foot Locker in New York recently. Local competitor data helped them increase AOV to $142. Foot Locker average is $108. Return rates dropped to 6.9%. Do you currently use local visitor data like this? So something like that. Maybe that's a little bit like, not technical, but a little bit too much. Let me give you another one. That one has already pulled a few pretty big leads. We just launched that one a few days ago. Um, this is another one. Reach out to like big zoos and aquariums. It's the same company. They have good good guest insights. Um, are you guys tracking visitor data? I know it can be hard for zoos and aquariums to get reliable visitor insights. Our platform shows cultural attractions, who their visitors are, where they're from, and it's perfect for focusing marketing efforts or planning events or attracting new members. Can I share a quick PDF with some samples? Something as simple as that. Um, I don't even necessarily think I'm not even so in love with that email, but I just pulled it up. But it's had the results on that were um, it's had a 6% reply rate. It's had a 15% conversion to interest out of 13,000 emails delivered. So we do quite a bit of volume, by the way, and we might talk about this. Um, but I like to power these campaigns with volume, especially if each campaign is very segmented. Each campaign needs a lot of bandwidth. So anyway, 13,000 emails delivered on that one. There's 10 different variations going out, but that's the gist of it.
And how in a period of a month, 13,000, or how many emails are you sending for the month in the month?
So for most clients, it's anywhere from 800 to 1,200 sends a day on email.
Okay.
Those are not all brand new contacts because we have multiple steps in each sequence and we have a high volume of sequences. So for this company that I mentioned, they have, I could see the exact number. I can give you the exact number, but it's 30 plus email campaigns that are running right now.
Oh,
So
wow.
if you're running that many campaigns, obviously you need volume, and especially for startups or a small business of any kind or any business, like you want to be able to test markets simultaneously, but you need volume to be able to do that. So I talked to a lot of orgs, like sales orgs, that they're sending just too low a volume and it's too manual for them to effectively test different markets. So use volume to your advantage. The couple of emails I read off to you were there was lots of iteration on those messages, but we figured it out because of the volume. We were able to test it faster.
And how many sequences of emails you send on those campaigns? Like three email sequence, six,
I
12?
usually do anywhere from 4 to 5. I don't usually go past 5.
Okay.
So I believe in, I haven't coined it, but it's called like sequence clusters. This guy, Justin Michael, who's really good. I'm sure people follow him on LinkedIn. He kind of coined it, something we had been doing for a while. He put a good name to it, where you send a series of emails over a 2, 3 week period, but then you stop. And because what happens is if you had a 15, 20, 30 step sequence, you're going to see a very high opt out rate once you get to that 5, 6, 7 step. And that's going to hurt your deliverability. It's going to hurt your engagement. The subdomain or the domain you're using is going to suffer. It's also just kind of annoying. Like people don't want to be in a 15, 20 step sequence. So the cluster is you do that over a period of weeks and you stop, you wait, maybe a month, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, and then you retarget them with something new. And at that point, they've likely forgotten about you.
Yeah, that's great. This great advice on creating copyright. Thanks for sharing those examples impromptu with us. One more. What are the common pitfalls before we move on to section that people make mistakes, common mistakes, pitfalls when they're creating their messaging, and what do you suggest they
Hmm.
do to avoid those?
I think there's just kind of like a misnomer that like you need to act a certain way in cold email. You need to speak a certain way. I need to be overly formal. I need to use big words to impress you. And it's quite the opposite. The data that we've run, and it's also been confirmed by a company called Lavender. If anybody has seen them, they have really good cold email data points. Speaking at a fifth grade language is going to get you more engagement than even eighth, ninth grade language. Sounds crazy, but
Yeah,
um, for people that are overly polishing their emails, and it's a little it, maybe it looks impressive to like internally, but people are unlikely to read that. They're going to scan your email in most cases. They're going to scan it. They're going to quickly decipher if this is something that can help them or if it's relevant, and they're going to move on.
yeah,
So make it as easy as possible to read. And I think a lot of these emails I see when I do audits and we bring in new clients, like we look at what they've been doing, and that's a common thing. It's very product centric. It's all about me. It's all about what I've done for other companies. Like, even what I've done for other companies, you think social proof is good, but it can be overkill. I'm giving you features. I'm giving you articles I've been in. I'm giving you all kinds of stuff that people just don't. They're not invested in you yet. So they will get invested in you if you can demonstrate that you know them a little bit. I know what your job is. I know what you care about. I know what kind of company you work at. I'm tapping into what your incentives might be. Do you want to get promoted? Do you want to get paid more? Do you want to look good? Do you want to remove some headaches? But if I can speak to one of those things, then I have credibility pretty quickly.
that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing those tips with us. Going on to strategies for building effective prospecting lists. You already mentioned about, you know, sending out thousands of emails, tens of thousands of emails every month, then A/B testing those to give enough quantity. How do you build the right prospecting list? What are some strategies, recommendations you have that can help truly convert those people?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in scaling relevance as much as you can versus I think what you see some teams doing is if it's like a non-focus account even, it's just like a tier B or tier C account, they'll just manually write an email to them like, hey, referencing their college or the mascot, or like, hey, you posted this thing on LinkedIn with no tie into the value prop. I think that doesn't scale, and I also don't think it works that well, actually, especially now. So we work with clients on going very deep on their ICPs, like the segments of who the decision makers are, what industry they're in, what vertical they're in, what type of role are they, do they use certain technology? So like an example campaign that we would run would be um, a company that is using Salesforce. It is a newly appointed CFO or VP of finance uh, that is in a scaling SaaS company past Series B, and we know they use Salesforce, and the product would integrate with Salesforce. Let's say, just as an example, like that would be a campaign because most CFOs, or any decision makers, like in their first year, for example, are going to spend a lot of budget, but CFOs are probably like-minded if they're in the same vertical, same stage of a company, same company type. They're all using Salesforce. So if you tie in some of those dots, you can scale that out to lots of CFOs in that specific situation, and you can write pretty crispy copy to those people. So that's how we would write one campaign, and we would do that lots of times in working with the client and figuring out all the possible plays. And we do a lot of strategy here. And I think any good agency should do a lot of strategy on this. Um, that's how we would write a campaign. But putting everybody in finance into one campaign, all industries, all verticals, doesn't matter what kind of company you are, doesn't matter what life cycle you're in, that's a mistake.
And if you were to, give us some best practices on how to segment those approaches that you've used, because I know from having met with a lot of CMOs and people running campaigns, many times they're like, "Hey, I just want to target, CEOs of tech companies."
Mm,
Right? They're like, "Okay, that's it. That's mine.
yeah.
Give me 10,000." Just
Right,
throw
right.
at them. What strategy do you have for them so that they can better segment that audience? And what tools would they use to do that?
So first and foremost, I'd probably challenge them on that a little bit, and I'd say, okay, if a CEO would make a decision on this, what about their president or their COO? Like, would they have any influence on this decision? It depends on the product. What kind of tech company? Is it fintech? Is it HR tech? Is it not SaaS? Is it like try to classify as much as you can. Dumping 10,000 CEOs in a campaign is a huge waste of effort, I think. It depends what you're selling, so I don't want to like just say that as a
Yeah.
blanket statement, but I would push back on that. Um, if you look back, and I would ask them this, if you look back in your CRM, if you look back at past engagements, they would probably find more variability in who's expressing interest in the product versus just the CEO. I almost feel like if you're just going after the CEO, like it's kind of a shortcut and you're just, okay, well, the CEO obviously makes the decision on this, but what size company? Are you going to hit up a CEO at a 2,000 person org? Because that's going to be less effective than a 50-person org. And at the 2,000 person org, who owns this? Is it operations? Is it, if it's a compliance tool, is it compliance? Is it HR? Like, should you go middle up or top down? That's another great play. Like, do you always start at the way top of the decision maker hierarchy, or do you start with someone maybe that would really use this tool or service, and start with them and see if you can get buy-in, and if you can get internal advocates? Like, it might make more sense to A/B test that. Try a top-down campaign, try a middle-up campaign, run them alongside each other, and see what works better. Like, let the data tell you. But I'd say I don't know which product you're talking about, but that feels pretty lazy to me. If that's the play.
So you explained a little bit top down, bottom up, middle as well. That crafts different campaign types. Any other advice you'd have, and how do you segment your campaigns to include more audiences?
I mean, the easiest thing is to back into it based on what problem you solve, of course. So, um, if there's a reason why your product would work better for financial services versus technology versus healthcare, like I would, I would at the very least break out campaigns by industry. And then at
Okay.
least after 2 months, you could say, you know what, like hospitals and healthcare like really resonated with this version of the message. Financial services was kind of a dud. So maybe we double down on healthcare. Like try to find the reasons why somebody in that space would buy you. But test it all at the very least by industry. I would go very role specific. So if you say, okay, you know what, we know we need to go after healthcare, but who within healthcare, which role, which title, and try to find signals. Are they in a stage of high growth? We can find that. Do they use certain technology? Buying intent, I think, is a little bit like third party intent's a little bit squirrely, but um, break it out by geography, break it out by size, break it out by revenue, break it out by segmentation. Like, is everybody a tier A account for you, like a focus account, or can you break it out? Like, here are tier A accounts. They're doing X in revenue plus tier B and C. Maybe we fully automate, but maybe tier A we plug in our SDR or business development rep to do cold calling to those focus accounts. Like that might be one way to break out your list is like size segmentation. Um, but I wouldn't have your SDR or BDR just like call everybody on a list, regardless of how important that client would be to you.
Now, can you share us, we're jumping into segmentation here a little bit. Can you share some success stories where precise segmentation, like you were alluding to, has really led to significant sales outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, so when we start working with clients, a lot of times sometimes they have very, very detailed understandings of like who they need to go after, but other times it's kind of like, well, like just, reach out to the C-suite. Going back to this example that I was reading off a couple of these sample emails, like initially it was kind of like, yeah, let's just reach out to the owner, the operator, maybe the president. As it turned out, like in the retail space, given what the product does, reaching out to people that head up real estate and leasing, people that head up data analytics, certain types of retailers do better, like roll-ups that own multiple brands did better than are now doing better than standalone brands. Like that's stuff that we learned in the market as we did outbound. And as we learned and iterated, we brought those learnings back to the client. Um, but we ended up going after new roles that were pretty niche at these companies, like analytics, research, data, um, certain types of marketers at bigger retailers. Like that was all stuff that we had intuition on and we tested. Um, but that's usually the arc of a relationship. It starts kind of broad, and once we hit the market and A/B test, we learn a lot.
Sounds great. Tools you recommend for creating these segments? I know you use Apollo. What are the tools that you use for segment
Yeah,
building?
I would say Apollo is a great one. Ocean is another good one for building lookalike. Sales Navigator is great. Those are the three core that we use. Um, and they all have similar filters. I think a lot of these databases have similar filters, like buying intent, which I think is more commoditized now and doesn't really work. But technographic data, growth signals, M&A activity, um, headcount, revenue, geography, role type, company keywords. Um, a lot of these databases offer that kind of stuff, but manipulating it is what is really where the rubber meets the road.
And when you get companies from those lists and segments, you go into each one and validate each one of those contacts you send it to. What kind of validation do you do on the list that they give you? Because I'm sure they're not always correct.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. No, not no, and especially with Sales Navigator. For anybody listening, I'm sure I'll get some head nods, but Sales Navigator results are terrible. Like you'll put in specific industries in Sales Nav, and like the first result will be a totally rogue like thing, and I don't quite know how that's possible, but um, yeah, I think you want to do a lot of keyword work. Boolean searches in Sales Nav helps, like where you do the quotations and or that gets your list tighter, but always spot check. I mean, we run the list. My team goes in once the list is built and they run through spot check. They'll check every other page. They'll make sure that there aren't any big misses. If they see a miss, they'll update the keyword section to get rid of them. But between that, building a good list with good keywords, good like a really tight list with lots of identifying factors, spot checking, and then verifying the data, it's still not going to be perfect, and you'll still have a couple of misses, but it'll be a lot better.
um, one key tactical question for you is how do you get lists out of Sales Navigator? Because you can build them, but I don't know. There's no export. What strategy you use to
Right.
get the list out?
They have all these scraper tools like Phantom Buster. We use Expandy, so we copy the LinkedIn URL once we have our completed list, and we paste it into Expandy, and Expandy will recognize the URL and the names in it
And it'll just
and
bring the
companies.
list down.
Hmm.
Okay, very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So there's a
Um,
lot of tools that do that now.
okay.
Yeah,
Going on to email delivery, you're awesome at this. You guys are some of the best in the business. What strategies, best practices you have to ensure that your emails get delivered appropriately to people?
yeah. That's a big conversation. First and foremost, and I still see a lot of teams doing it. Don't send from your main domain ever. Even if it's 50 emails a day and you're like, it's not a big deal. It's just 50 a day. If three or four of those people move you to spam, even a week, let's just say it happens every week, you get five or six of them, it's going to affect that domain reputation. Domains are like people, they have reputations. And when they approach a server will say, okay, who is this domain? How long have they been around for? Do they get spam blocked a lot? Are they authenticated with SPF, DKIM, DMARC? Um, is there any criminal activity maybe happening from this domain? There's all these there's this huge checklist of how healthy this domain is, and if you pass the test, they'll let you in their inbox. So if enough people move you to spam, even if the targeting's great, the copy's great, but whatever, you emailed somebody that just woke up on the wrong side of the bed and they move you to spam, main domain is affected. So all your other activities with sending emails to customers, clients, investors, each other, like that will be affected adversely. So always make sure you isolate all activity. If it's outbound, if it's any form of marketing, if it's a newsletter, anything that is not just day to day, right? Day to day communication, isolate it. So, and people are going to have opinions on this that are varying, but what I've seen, and I have a very good CTO that does this all day long, best practice is to have what's called a subdomain. So subdomain, let's say my main website is modernoutbound.com, right? A subdomain of that might be go.modernoutbound.com or get or m.modernoutbound.com or get dot, right? It's that those three words or whatever, one letter or three letters before the domain. And that's a good way to isolate. It kind of protects that root domain. But what I would recommend is, and it's not because it's not foolproof. It does a pretty good job, but foolproof is if you set up a subdomain on a secondary domain. So if you're doing outbound and you have a sales team or you have multiple salespeople, multiple people that are out doing prospecting, you want them to be on subdomains on secondary domains that you own. And those secondary domains, so instead of modernoutbound.com, I have other domains. I have modernoutbound.co, I have modernoutbound.io, that TLD at the end, right? That makes it a different domain. Have a few of those and set up subdomains under those. And what that will allow you to do is it protects your main domain. It also protects the secondary domain. So it gives you this really good flexibility that, hey, I have two or three subdomains under this separate domain. One of those subdomains isn't doing so well this week. The sender scores drop, the IP health isn't as good. Don't continue hammering that same subdomain because you're just going to dig yourself into a deeper corner. What I would recommend and what we do is what's called domain rotation. So we rotate those subdomains in and out depending on how well they're performing. And that's a great, even at low volumes, that's a great way to make sure that you're going to get in primary inboxes and you're not going to have burned domains that are just sitting on the sidelines. Now, obviously, I'm simplifying it. There's quite a bit involved with setting up subdomains and domains the right way. Like you need to authenticate it the right way. You've got to have, you should really have somebody who knows how to do that correctly, how to bypass filters, how to make sure that you have ultimate credibility from that domain. Um, and then the other pieces that we talked about, like making sure your data's clean, making sure that your copy is working and it's getting engagement, because your subdomains and all that can be set up perfectly. But if your reply rates are not are not good and they're less than 1%, even worse, uh, you're still going to suffer. And eventually that subdomain will drop off.
Yeah, in regards to tracking the domain health, what tools do you recommend people use to see is the domain healthy? Should I rotate it? Should I not?
Yeah, there's two or three things I'd look at. So I look at the open rate first and foremost. It's not the most important metric, and I would take it with a grain of salt. All these new Apple iOS settings are like automatically opening emails, so you kind of look at it with a grain of salt, but it is directionally right, I find, especially when you assign the reply rate to the open rate. More importantly, I use a tool called MailReach. We use it for all of our clients. It increases the reputation of the actual mailbox by creating traffic, but it also gives us a spam report. So every day we get a spam report on those subdomains. Is it high 90s? Is it is it in the red? Is it not doing well? That's a good indicator. There's another great tool that we use called Glock Apps, which I'm sure people have heard of, but it's a much deeper dive into the health of that domain. We also use a custom server, uh, receiving server, which gives us like day-to-day IP health. So there's three or four metrics that we look at. But anybody listening to this, I would I would use a tool like MailReach because it gives you a basic sender score. It also increases the reputation of the subdomain or the mailbox. I would obsessively look at your open and reply rates every week. And if you're seeing drop offs there, let's say you don't want to use all these fancy tools, at the very least, I would look at that every week. Has engagement really dropped off, and what should I do about it? Because if it's going down, maybe your spam rate's going up, your bounce rate's going up, I would do something about it. because that usually doesn't recover.
Yeah, that good feedback. What about we only got warm ups. Do you suggest doing a warm up? How long do you warm up a domain for? Because someone signs up and they want to do campaigns, it may take
Mhm.
them. How long does it take before they can actually send a campaign on the new domain?
So here's a big one, and this is something I still see people do. Don't don't send from a new domain. Like that's a big one. That's going to change your warm up schedule. If you buy a new domain on GoDaddy, some people might hear this and they'll go on GoDaddy and buy a bunch of new domains. You can't use those for a good 3 months. You could technically, but I wouldn't recommend it. And a lot of people do this. But a domain should be at least 3 to 6 plus months old. It'll have a better reputation with servers. That's first and foremost. I would take a 2 or 3 week warm up schedule. So like day one, it depends how much volume you want to end up at. But for us, we're getting to 800, 900, 1,000 sends. We essentially increase every day manually by 25 to 30 sends. And all the while we're assessing performance. So if the deliverability and the health score is good and strong, it's just a regular warm up. If we're hitting a hiccup and it's engagement's dropped off in week 2 of outreach, we may throttle the volume down. So you want to look at your score, continue to warm up, assuming everything looks healthy. But I would take a good, especially if you're going to get to several hundred a day, you'll want to take 2, 3 plus weeks to get to that final number. You'll want to space it out across those subdomains too. So you load balance. You're not going to put everything on the same subdomain. Like, let's say you said, I want to send 500 across 2 people a day. You don't do that all in the same subdomain. You would give them each their own sub, even maybe their own separate domains. You'd warm those up individually, right? And you'd assess performance.
Now we have a question from Rebecca here. Should small businesses or sole entrepreneurs rotate domains or only larger businesses?
I think anybody that is serious about outreach and they want to do legitimate or healthy volume should do this. I don't think it's not necessarily a size thing. Now, obviously, it's a good question because as you go up on the size and there's bigger orgs with bigger teams, it becomes way more critical because there's just more people sending emails. So that it's you'll get yourself into a very, very deep dark hole if you don't do this at that size of an org. But if you're a solopreneur, you're just getting started, yeah, I would have a couple of subdomains on a separate domain at the very least. Keep the volume really low and just test, make sure that it's working, that you're getting responses. Um, yeah, I think this could be applied to any size org.
Well, we're coming up on the time here. This has been an amazing session. You've gone so deep. You revealed a lot of secrets to us here. Any lasting thoughts you would like to give the audience before we end?
No, if anybody wants to learn more, feel free to reach out. But I would say outbound is has evolved a lot over the years. Like I think some people still have the mindset from 6, 7 years ago, and they're running outbound plays the same way they did 6, 7 years ago. But it's become very much a rev ops job now, and real tech know-how is required to be able to do it right. Gone are the days where you get like this list, you bought a list, and you just send some emails, make some calls like that. That isn't really going to move the needle, especially with the copywriting styles that I'm still seeing being pushed out. So just get smart on the channel, work with an expert, or if you want to do it on your own, like just really dive into this. It's not a set it and forget it channel, um, maybe like it used to be years back.
Joel, that's great advice. You've been a delight to talk to. You've given us so much insights, made us really think about how to improve our outbound sales strategy, how to organize ourselves. I mean, we could sit here for another hour or two, just kind of learning from you. But it's been a pleasure to have you. We
Likewise.
appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And for the audience, thanks for asking questions, participating. I know many of you will be listening to this recording later. We'll post it on the training section. On our expert session, you can reach out and talk to Joel. You can also reach out directly to him. Joel, what's your website that they can go to?
Yeah, check us out, modernoutbound.com. And I share almost daily tips on outbound on LinkedIn. So just follow me, Joel Graber. and looking forward to hearing from you all.
Very good. Appreciate everybody. And then we have two more sessions for the rest of today um, about uh, connecting and converting and improving social selling as well as digital marketing and AI. So, Joel, thank you. If you hang on a little bit, we'll make sure recordings are good, and then we will see everybody in 15 minutes.
Thanks.